why I don't like damn, why I don't like comic books, DC and Marvel. Media retrospection. Sorry, it's hard to read with
I
these
don't
glasses
like
on.
comic books.
What's your problem?
Okay, it's a bit of a blanket statement, but just hear me out.
Listen to me!
When I say comic books here, I'm talking about the mainstream Marvel and DC comics, as I've read a few smaller standalone series, which I have no problems with. And let me be clear here before I start this video, that I don't mean this as an attack against anyone who reads and enjoys comics. I myself have read quite a few series, although I'm probably more of what you'd call a casual reader. So what I'm explaining here is just my own personal opinion and why I personally don't like comic books. There's no denying that comic books are a cultural phenomenon. Characters like Batman, Spider-Man, and Superman have basically become our modern-day mythology, beloved by millions across the globe. But popularity doesn't always equal perfection, and I want to discuss today what I think are the biggest issues with these characters and their stories. So, whether you're a die-hard comic fan or more of a casual reader, just hear me out, see what you think, and let's jump straight in. The core issue I have with mainstream comics, i.e. DC and Marvel, is what I call the illusion of change.
Nothing changes. It always stays the same.
Feel like things are progressing and that characters are growing and that the world is changing. But in reality, it's all a carefully crafted illusion. There's a concept known as a floating timeline, which we need to talk about here. In comics, a floating timeline is a device which...
It's like how the Fantastic Four, everything always happens 14 years after the Fantastic Four is like made. So every couple years they'll switch it up.
Allows characters and their worlds to exist in a kind of weird, perpetual present day, even as real world time passes. So
that's why they switched the Punisher's
was originally tied to
Punisher's War. He no longer fights in Vietnam.
This was updated to the Gulf War and then later to conflicts in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And whilst this approach somewhat keeps characters fresh and relevant, in reality there is no meaningful long-term change or progression. What this concept of a floating timeline ends up doing is it allows publishers to keep characters eternally marketable, but it comes at the cost of genuine, lasting change.
Yeah.
And I know this might sound silly or nitpicky, and we'll keep expanding on this throughout the video.
That's fair, though.
But to me, this idea runs contrary to the very essence of storytelling. I'll talk more about this in the second part of the video, but to me, a story is fundamentally about going on a journey with a character, seeing and experiencing how they change and evolve over time, seeing them overcome obstacles and challenges, and finally, experiencing
There'll never be a real ending.
Ending of the story and the resolution of the character arc. So again, if we come back to comic stories,
there's Red Hulk, like Red Skull always come back for Cap. All these villains always come back.
This illusion of change is what is often called a revolving door of death. In comics, death is rarely permanent. Characters die in dramatic, sales-boosting events, only to be resurrected a few years, or sometimes even months, later. This kind of cycle creates a boy who cried wolf scenario.
Yeah.
When a character dies or faces a life-changing event, we can't fully invest emotionally, because we know it's likely to be reversed. I mean, if we're honest, we all know that a character like Superman or Batman can never be killed off, or even permanently crippled or changed. Because at the end of the day, status quo is king in comics. No matter what happens, things must always return to a recognizable baseline. And that is why, despite decades of stories, Bruce Wayne is still Batman, still brooding, and still fighting the same villains. Peter Parker is still struggling to balance his personal life with being Spider-Man. And the X-Men are still fighting for acceptance in a world that fears and hates them. Any significant changes, marriages, children, career shifts, major character developments, so on and so on, are often undone to maintain this status
It is
quo.
sad, but it's like...
And perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this illusion is the concept of the never-ending battle. Superheroes can never truly win. They just can't. If Batman actually cleaned up Gotham for good, or if the Avengers brought lasting peace to the world, what stories would be left to tell?
It's a shame.
That's why Gotham is still as crime-ridden as ever, despite Batman's efforts for almost a century. And it's why the Marvel Universe seems to face a world-ending threat every summer. The conflict can never truly end, because ending the conflict means ending the story, and probably more importantly, ending the revenue stream. And we all know the money must flow.
Spice must flow.
This leads us on to the second part of what I wanted to discuss.
The world revolves
Cost to
around money.
storytelling. I spoke briefly before about how I believe the very nature of comic books runs contrary to the essence of storytelling. I think we can break this down further into two key aspects. The first being the lack of satisfying conclusions and diluted character development, and the second is repetitive storylines. So let's discuss each of these in turn. For the first point, one of the most frustrating aspects of mainstream comics, and again I'm talking about DC and Marvel mainly here, is the absence of true, satisfying conclusions, which goes hand in hand with a dilution.
Lex Luthor always
meaningful
comes
character
back. He always
development.
tries to kill
Think about
Superman.
your
Yeah.
favorite novels or TV series, and think about what makes them powerful.
The
Often
end.
it's the journey of the characters, how they grow and change, and how their stories conclude. In Breaking Bad, which is one of my favorite shows of all time, we see Walter White's complete transformation from a
To
mild-mannered
Heisenberg.
chemistry teacher to a drug.
I am the danger, Skylar.
Definitive
I am the one
that
who
brings his
knocks.
character arc to a close. And this conclusion allows
Yeah.
viewers to reflect on the entire journey that Walter White went on, providing a sense of catharsis and closure. But in mainstream comics, the satisfaction is often denied to the readers. The
I don't really
never-ending nature
read
of the
comics.
stories
I'm just
means
not
that
very good
true
at reading the other
resolution
reading.
is always just out of
But
reach.
I do like
Like
reading
I
some.
was saying before, Batman will
But
always
I
be
like watching
Batman,
superhero
doomed to
movies and
forever
shows.
fight crime in Gotham. Spider-Man will always struggle, balancing his personal life and his superhero duties.
You would think bro
Their
had a
stories
schedule
are
by then
designed
now,
to
man.
continue indefinitely. And so, in
Yeah.
a funny way, the characters are doomed to suffer eternally.
Yeah.
because they can never be content. They
No
can
heroes
never be
actually.
allowed to
They don't have a
achieve their
hero's
goals.
journeys and
This lack of conclusion robs
Sucks.
the stories of their emotional power. It's hard to feel the weight of a character's journey when you know they'll eventually and inevitably return to square one. For me, it's like watching a TV show where every episode ends with, "It was all a dream." Eventually, the stakes cease to matter. And now, if we talk about the second point, which is the repetitive storylines, I think another casualty of the never-ending narrative is originality. I can't even blame the writers for this, because when you have to tell stories about the same characters month after month, year after year, for decades and decades, you inevitably start repeating yourself. How many times has a hero turned evil only to be redeemed?
yeah.
How often have we seen the death of a major character, knowing they'll return? Even Elseworld stories and alternate versions of characters, I feel, are becoming repetitive at this point. How many times have we seen an evil Superman? These tropes aren't inherently bad.
I hate the
but the
evil
overused
evil
comics
Superman
have
trope.
turned them
Dude,
into cliches.
Homelander,
It's reached a
well,
point where
Omni-Man
major
does it the
comic
best.
events often
Omni-Man
feel
does
like
the best.
reshuffling
Homelander
the
is
same
so
deck of cards
boring.
rather than introducing genuinely new ideas. I think this really stifles creativity. Writers are often constrained by the need to maintain the status quo, limiting their ability to take characters in truly new and truly interesting directions. Now, having spoken about these problems I have with mainstream comics, I want to quickly touch on a comparable example where I think a lot of these
Oh, the What If
problems
show
are avoided.
sucks. Whoever watches
That's
What If is just a
happening
Marvel
in the
dick
manga
rider.
industry.
Let's be real. You're just gargling on the meat. Japanese manga.
The manga
I gotta
industry's
appreciate
approach to
the manga.
storytelling offers
I
a
like
stark
anime.
contrast to Western comics and demonstrates that the problem isn't with the comic medium itself, it's just the specific approach of mainstream Western comics that creates the issues that we've discussed. I'm actually not sure where this cultural difference comes from, so if anyone is able to shed any light on it, I'd be quite interested to learn. Anyway, unlike many Western comics, most manga series are conceived with a defined story arc in mind. They have a clear beginning, middle, and
You showed Dragon Ball. Let's be real. Dragon Ball's been running for 40 years, 30, 40 years, whatever. How many times does Goku have to go fight a new guy who wants to destroy the world? How many times has Goku died? Oh, I love Dragon Ball. Don't get me wrong, but you're sounding stupid.
End. And what this structure
Use like
allows
Naruto or
several
like
key
Luffy's the
advantages.
better
Character
example.
growth. Characters in manga can undergo genuine.
Does
lasting
Goku
development.
really grow
Take
though?
Naruto, for example, we follow him right the way from when he's a mischievous child who has been outcast by the village to a respected leader of that same village, with each experience along the way shaping his growth. Second, narrative progression. Manga stories can build towards a climax and a resolution. For example, you could take a series like Death Note or Full Metal Alchemist and see that they have complex plots that evolve over time. With
I guess,
actions having
man.
lasting
But
consequences.
still,
There's no
comics
reset
also
button
have
at the
that.
end of each
You're just
volume.
sounding stupid.
Finally, satisfying conclusions. When a manga ends, it often provides closure for its characters
Yap,
and
yap, yap.
storylines, leaving readers with a sense of completion rather than an indefinite, open-ended narrative. I also think that manga allows for greater creative freedom and genre diversity. While superhero stories seem to dominate Western comics, manga covers a vast array of genres, from sports to cooking to psychological thrillers to slice of life stories. Manga offers something for every taste, and this diversity keeps the medium dynamic and allows for the constant introduction of fresh concepts and storytelling approaches. Manga creators themselves can take bigger risks with their stories and characters. If a bold choice doesn't work out, it doesn't need to be undone or retconned, because the series will eventually conclude anyway, and I think this leads to more innovative and surprising narratives. I also think the manga publishing model contributes to some of these differences.
Yeah, it's
Many
weekly.
manga series are the vision of a single creator or sometimes a small team, which allows
Yeah,
for
but then they
a
work
consistent
themselves to
and
death.
focused narrative
Because
compared
it's
to
weekly.
rotating
You're not talking about.
creative
You're talking about
teams
the
in
work
Western
ethic.
comics.
They work
Equally,
weekly. They have to
manga
push out
definitely
weekly,
isn't without its own issues, and I
weekly.
know the manga
Working
industry
hours on
treats
hours.
its artists and creators really.
Let me pull it up. Working on thumbnails throughout page. Yeah, look at this. Sleeping 2 hours that day. He sleeps for 2 hours. This is such a bad schedule. You sound stupid, man. Pissing me off.
Poorly, but overall, when we think about storytelling, I think
Oh, but the storytelling matters more, not their personal health.
approach often results in
Because
more
them dying, working on their work. Let's talk about Berserk.
satisfying and complete stories.
Let's talk
I
about
do believe that
Hunter.
comics as a medium
Dumbass.
definitely support rich, evolving narratives with genuine character growth and satisfying conclusions. Invincible is a great
Sound like a
example,
cock.
and there's another series I can remember off the top of my head.
Sorry, man, that's rude.
Irredeemable
This video's
about
not even that bad.
Plutonian, which I also think was a great comic. So, all in all, my dislike of mainstream comics, and again,
You just want to be different.
Marvel, isn't really about the medium itself, but about what I consider their lost.
It's not
potential. If we
Sagoi.
take the individual comic stories on their own, they're actually really good, but you just have to look at them in isolation.
That's
to
what
grasp
you're
the
meant to
broader narrative.
do.
And also, to be clear, this critique doesn't negate.
There's
the
so
cultural
many comic book
importance of
stories about, like,
comics.
Batman that are one shot, like that are in their own timeline. You go
Stories
read
have
them.
created
You don't have to
enduring
read, like-
characters and mythologies that have captured imaginations for decades. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? As always,
Alright, good video, man. Why I don't like comic books. I'm done. I can't watch any more videos, guys.